Hi gang, the joy of football comes from two different countries this week. I'm in Italy, and Martin.
Well, I'm back home in England, where we need to talk about, and for fans of Aston Villa, Leeds and Crystal Palace, some nice things being said.
Martin's letter from the gantry is about his times in Italy.
We've got Over Land and Sea, one of our regular sections, and it's Italy, from all the difficulties of being the best league in the world to where they are now.
Finally, it's three of the best, and Martin's gone down the divisions and around the histories and right up to date with a limping survivor who's looking absolutely the top athlete again.
The Joy of Football podcast. With me, Neil Barnett.
And with me, Martin Tyler.
Looks for Xavi! Rooney! Aguero!
The Joy of Football.
Hello, the joy of football with Martin Tyler, the greatest commentator in the world, and me, Neil Barnett, comes to you today on Zoom because I am in Bergamo in Italy. Chelsea playing Atalanta. I'm here to support my team. And the joy of football comes to you today with a sponsor. Financial advice from St. James's Place sponsors the joy of football. More on that later. Martin, I'm not going to muck around. I'm going to go straight into the first segment, which is we need to talk about. And there are a lot of things we need to talk about ahead of me and you both talking about Italy. And we're going to start with Aston Villa. Now, since this podcast has been going, we have said several times that Aston Villa ought to be a more successful club with their 42,000 capacity, biggest club in the second city of Birmingham in England. And they ought to kind of be getting into Europe most years, really every year, just about, and into the Champions League every so often. And Unai Emery got them into the Champions League, got them to the quarterfinals of the Champions League, got them into the Europa League this year. They've now beaten top of the table Arsenal. They're in third place, 4 points ahead of fourth place. Are they becoming the club that we've been saying they should become?
Well, of course, they have been the club in various golden periods in the past, Aston Villa, one of the great formative clubs, Neil, or should I call you Neil Barnetti today?
Yes.
The history of Aston Villa is marvellous, really. And of course, you and I both remember the times where they were champions of the old First Division in 1981 and won the European Cup. Now the Champions League, of course, in 1982. And all that talk you're talking up now was what they were then. And they've obviously had some downs, but they've not been totally out of the picture at all. And I must say, you mentioned them being in the Europa League. I was at the last game of the last season where they won that at Manchester United. They'd have been in the Champions League. And Emi Martinez was a big factor in the way they're playing now, and has been for obviously a couple of years since he left Arsenal. He got sent off in that game and it rather pulled that particular rug from underneath them. So
they also had a goal. They had a goal chalked off.
Yes.
When the referee blew the whistle before the ball went in the net for a foul that maybe wasn't a foul, and they were unlucky.
Yeah, they were that close, really, really that close. And what they have become, Unai Emery is, I think, the most relentless manager that there is. Certainly, if you had to watch just a manager on the touchline and couldn't see the game, you'd watch him, wouldn't you? His energy is as much as the players at times. And he must take all the credit for it. I mean, they've moved players in and moved players out. They seem to have been caught up, Neil, in this financial predicament a couple of years ago where they were making sort of paper transfers. They were actual transfers, but it seemed to be just shuffling the accounts with one or two other clubs joining in on that. And obviously the players are strong. They've got strong international players. I mean, they brought in Rashford and Asensio last year. Then Daniel Marlon they got, and he's doing extremely well now. Emi Buendia was out of the picture because of injury, and now he's emerged, and virtually the last kick of the game, wasn't it, that they beat Arsenal with him scoring. People like Matty Cash, listening to the commentaries I watched the game at home on Saturday, and listening to commentaries pointed out by Darren Fletcher that Cash could have actually signed up for England, really. And he's played that well. He'd be in England for him now, but he didn't think he'd be an international. And so he ended up going with the Polish side of the family. And he's doing very well for Poland.
Do we know if he speaks Polish?
I don't know, but it's not an easy language to learn. But I wouldn't be surprised if his mum's Polish, and why not? He might have been weaned up on Polish language, and I think that kind of dual skill is something that we don't really pay enough tribute to when we get all these foreign players and we can interview them in English. I always think it's absolutely marvelous, and if Matty can hold his own when he's got the Polish TV commentator asking the questions, good luck to him. He played very well.
I could imagine you in your commentary saying he's polished in Polish, but
no, only on the podcast, Neil. If I knew, I would have said it by
now. What has gone right?
Emery, who was rather, I think, summarily dismissed at Arsenal. Obviously wasn't quite the fit that it is at Villa. I think they've managed to marry the present to the past very well. They haven't lost their sense of history. The ground we've talked about the ground before, haven't we? It's a wonderful place to visit. If you don't know anything about football or don't even like football, the sheer architecture from the outside of the ground makes it a special place. And it's a big city, and they've now had a run in European football. They're believing in themselves, and Emery must take great credit for that as well. So I think it's all coming together nicely, and has been for a couple of years.
I think one of the problems that we've had, and I in particular have had with the team that I am out here in Italy supporting, is that possession football doesn't have to mean, but does mean too often, lack of intensity. And we spoke about how the Premier League seemed to be getting back to some blood and guts quality last week. And I think that one of the great qualities of Unai Emery teams is intensity, is relentlessness, is pressure, running, high tempo running. They are possibly of the top teams as relentless as any of them.
Yes, and they get the athleticism out of everybody. I mean, John McGinn isn't really built like an athlete. With great respect to John, I have huge admiration for him as a player, but he performs athletically in the team. He covers his ground, and he's a great leader. Yuri Tielemans hasn't always been everyone's cup of tea in terms of the intensity of his play, but he is playing. He's bought into it now, and he's got back in the team. He's got back fit again. No, they know what.
It took him a season to do that when he arrived.
Yeah, and that happens sometimes. It's not naturally if you've been brought up to play another way. That's why sometimes players come into clubs and go straight out again, window to window, because they just can't adapt to the type of football that the manager has been imposing on the team. We talk a lot about what managers want and what they get, and they are perhaps less flexible, but more demanding, if you see what I mean. And what they want, they get. They demand it.
I think it's worth remembering as well how Aston Villa's season started, because it started so badly after that disappointment of not qualifying for the Champions League. They drew their opening game at home to Newcastle goalless, lost at Brentford, lost 3-0, got smashed at home by Crystal Palace, drew at Everton, went out of the
Palace always beat them, Neil. Palace beat them, goodness, how many times last season in different competitions. So take that one as read.
Went out of the Carabao Cup on penalties at Brentford, only drew at Sunderland, and they only really got their season going at the end of September when they beat Bologna at home in the Europa League, followed by Fulham at home at the weekend, then won away at Feyenoord, home to Burnley, away to Tottenham. The wins started coming. So they haven't naturally gone in to the top of the table. They've had to fight for the right to go to the top of the table.
Which is absolutely as it should be. I mean, you mentioned Palace, and I threw that comment in, but Palace are just behind them.
Yeah,
so
we're going to
talk. Yeah, and it's right that we do. But no, I think the way we look at football, we're always looking for the elite teams to perform at a level that nobody else can catch them. It hasn't quite been like that. And now, if we look at Arsenal being the title favourites and Manchester City, they're the two above Aston Villa. So they're the two that they've got. If we're talking about them raising their standards, which you're rightly saying they do, and they have done, that's the standard that they've got to meet. I mean, it's in our lifetime, Aston Villa have been champions. So why can't they be champions again?
We need to talk about Leeds United. You and I were at Ellen Road to see Leeds smash Chelsea by 3-1. Leeds have got a funny old record this season. They're one of those teams whose home and away form is completely different. So away from home, they've played 7 league games, lost 6 and won 1. But at home, they've got 12 points from 8 games. And as a result, they're a few points above the relegation zone. What did you make of Leeds at Ellen Road?
Well, I take you back, Neil, to the press conference I was at with Enzo Maresca the day before, when he was really making a little bit of theatre about whether Leeds were going to stick to what they played in the second half of Manchester City. Remember, they were 2-0 down. They got back to 2-2 and just lost to a very late goal. But they switched at half-time from their usual system to a 3-5-2 system. And at that point, they'd scored 11 goals in 12 and a half games. Then they got 2 in the second half at City. Then they got 3 against Chelsea. And then they got 3 against Liverpool. So it looks like the switch in the system, which Daniel Farke hasn't used very often, certainly in his more mature years working in England, may have done when he was learning the job really in his own country. So that looks the absolute key to it, really. I mean, you can remember with your team under Conte, that switch at half-time at Arsenal, which was forced because they were losing, and they were Leeds were in exactly the same position. They were getting pumped at the Etihad, so the change was made, and Conte stuck with that for the rest of the season and won the league. So I'm not saying Leeds are going to do that, but it should get them out of trouble.
And they've had trouble scoring goals. And by changing, he's changed to a good old-fashioned almost 3-5-2. And he's got
the 2 strikers, Neil. I mean, it was wonderful to see. That was my highlight of watching the game, really. Calvert-Lewin and Lucas Mecha were up there at times. They almost bumped into each other like forwards used to do in the old days when we had to. And then Mecha got injured in that game and didn't play in the Liverpool game. And Okafor, who's a backup striker during this season, he played that role. And it looked at the beginning of the game as though, that was a flash in the pan, but it got them back into the game. And, to have got 4 points from those games and scored 6 goals is a really creditable effort. They were 2-0 down to Liverpool, 3-2 down to Liverpool. And they kept on going to the end. I mean, the other thing, obviously, you don't want to comment about was the bizarreness of the goal that really decided the game against Chelsea. Pedro Neto had come on to make it 2-1 straight right at the start of the second half. It looked as though Chelsea were on their way back into maybe to all 3 points. And then Gusto and Tosin, and to some extent the goalkeeper, made a pig's ear of a situation, and Dominic Calvert-Lewin scored.
Yeah. To be honest, I'll excuse Gusto and the goalkeeper and poor old Adebayo, who didn't even make the bench against Bournemouth. I think paid the price for that. We talk a lot about the way football is run now, and the money, and the fact that tourists come in and watch games, and that legacy supporters aren't as welcome by the big clubs anymore. It's not like that at Leeds. At Leeds, it's ferocious local Yorkshire people supporting their team. How important will Ellen Road be to Leeds' survival? Because much, of course, you know me, I'm a child of the 60s, a hippie, peace and love, all that. Don't hate Tottenham, don't hate Liverpool, don't hate Man U, any of them. But I'm a child of the 60s and I bloody hate Leeds. How much will that Ellen Road atmosphere be critical in their chances of staying up?
Well, I would say I joined Yorkshire Television in 1976, and I was taken to the ground for some publicity pictures. And then there was a game.
They'd just been in the European Cup final then.
Yeah. They'd been gone to England, but they were obviously still a lot of the players were there. And basically, I started that week or the week after, and Leeds, we were at Leeds quite a lot because they were the main club in Yorkshire. The other Yorkshire clubs all thought we were Leeds fans. It wasn't true, but that was the only way we could get First Division football on our screens. I don't think it's changed. The ground's hardly changed. You described it perfectly. The local people, and even some of the stewards were there in the 70s. We were talking about it as I was coming out of the ground, and it had felt like one of those games from the 70s. So it's a great asset. In difficult times, I'm sure they'll stand the test. They've had a relegation recently, so they know how tough it can get. But they've just hit. Maybe it's a temporary solution. Maybe it's just a bit of sticking plaster over a wound that will open up over the rest of the season. But there was enough in those 2 games to suggest it's a healing process.
Coming up, we've got three of the best, and I can reveal exclusively that both Martin and I have got a Leeds player in our 3 this week. We need to talk about Crystal Palace. Crystal Palace have gone into the top 4. Now, let's just look at the start of their season, because like Aston Villa, they really struggled, having, of course, won the FA Cup and then discovered that they weren't in the Europa League because of ownership issues. So they started well enough, winning the Community Shield on penalties against Liverpool. They got a goalless draw at Chelsea, and then they were straight into the UEFA Conference playoffs to get into the league stage. They beat Fredrikstad 1-0 at home, but they could only draw their second league game at home to Nottingham Forest 1-0. So in fact, they drew against Liverpool, drew against Chelsea, drew against Nottingham Forest, drew their away game 0-0 with Fredrikstad to go into the league stage, then won at Aston Villa that 3-0, drew at home to Arsenal 0-0, but were held by Millwall at home and had to win on penalties in the Carabao Cup. And then their season really got going. They won 2-1 at West Ham, and they won 2-1 with a last-minute winner against Liverpool, and so it went on. There's a shadow hanging over Palace because they're not in the Europa League. They've had a couple of bad conference results by playing a kind of second 11.
No. Let me stop you there, Neil. They don't play a second 11. That's one of the difficulties they have. I think he made 3 changes for the Strasbourg game, all players that you would be able to recognise. And so Oliver Glasner goes with the group, the squad. He takes the same 18 pretty much everywhere, 20, whatever it is now. And I've done 2 Palace games. They won't thank me for saying this, both on the back of Thursday night games, away games in the conference. And they've lost them both after going in front at Everton and at home to Manchester United. So the second half performances. I mean, I was speaking to a couple of the United players after the win at Palace, and they said, we said at halftime that they're going to go, they'll be tired, and they were. So that's part of the problem, but they seem to recover very quickly. And what they do is they defend very well. They've got the second best defensive record to Arsenal. And with no surprise, that game was 0-0, was it, when they played each other that you mentioned? And they've got players who can take a chance. I mean, they're very good at set pieces. They're very clever. They won the game at Fulham with Mark Gay's header. And whether Gay's going to be there through the winter transfer window, we'll have to wait and see. And whether Glasner's going to be there, he was furious, of course, inwardly, kept it to himself about the Europa League and the conference, which was an admin error by the club, it seems to me anyway.
Well, that is the shadow hanging over them. That I was going to say, the second shadow, Glasner, especially Gahey as well.
Yeah, but they've divvied up. Well, they've got Pino into not exactly the same player as Eze, but he's doing very well, and he's regular in the team. They've covered for Lise leaving. You're great. You're a great supporter of Wilf Zaha, and when he went, you remember that phase where if Zaha wasn't in the team, they never won, and that went on a long time. So they've got some resilience. Dougie Friedman, who's a great recognizer of talent, has moved on, but obviously they've been replacing that, and things do move on. So rather like Brighton, they always have somebody in line when their managers move. Then I'm sure Palace will be trying to persuade Glasner to stay, but he looks like a man who knows exactly where his pathway is going. We talk about Emery being a hard-working, make his players work hard. You get a day off at Crystal Palace, you should crack open privately the champagne, because they don't come along very often.
No, and they are, and this I think may be one of the reasons why Glasner hasn't got one of the really big jobs yet. They are a very much part of the bus counter-attacking team, and I don't mean that as a put down in any way. I think it's absolutely brilliant what they're doing, and they're making the most of what they've got. But as a result of that, their home form, 1-2, drawn 4, lost 1, has brought 10 points, and their away form, 1-5, drawn 1, lost 2, has brought 16 points, and it's a lot easier to be a counter-attacking team if you're a small club than it is if you're a big club.
Well, I wouldn't call them a small club. I think I lived in South London for a long time. I suppose technically you've lived south of the river, haven't you? Just, but I lived in Streatham and for quite a long time, and then Dulwich. So it was always odd that to go to the top division football, you really had to go across the Thames for London football. And of course, Millwall had a stint in the first division, didn't they, before the Premier League started? Wimbledon were using Crystal Palace facilities to be a Premier League team. And Charlton, of course, have been in the Premier League as well. So, but I do think it's a part of London where there's a lot of football passion. It's sort of downgraded the old joke about taxi drivers. So I won't take you south of the river, mate. That's not strictly true. I got quite a lot of taxis home when I was living in Streatham. So, but I think that they're quite special in that in that position that they've got. And the ground could be bigger, but it's their ground, and they've been there a long time, and it's got that special Holmesdale Road, the Holmesdale Road enders, who really crack up the volume, don't they? Crank up the volume.
The argument about Crystal Palace's best ever player, which I may have been responsible, the current argument for starting when I said that Wilf Zaha for me was their best ever player, is going on social media quite ferociously. And there's a lot of Zaha supporters but there's a lot who want to go with someone who maybe had a little bit more finesse than he did. And of course, the Ian Wrights and the era, that era and before even, are in there. But I stick by what I say. But look out for it. It's on everywhere from TikTok to Instagram, and it's carrying on under that. Yeah. One more thing we need to talk about. Struggling. Tottenham again. Manchester United to a lesser extent, maybe. Newcastle struggling. Paris Saint-Germain on top in France. Lens are top, for goodness sake. Real Madrid.
Yeah, there's only 1 point in it, and they're second in the Champions League table as we speak.
But they're PSG. And they're
1 point behind Lens. They score in stacks of goals. They'll win the league.
Real Madrid have fallen 4 points behind Barcelona, and Xabi Alonso seems to be struggling in the role, struggling to establish himself in the role. There's a lot of big clubs struggling at the moment. And I want to go back to 2010 and the round of 16 in the Champions League, when Inter Milan knocked Chelsea out on their way to winning the Champions League. It was 2.5 years since Jose Mourinho had been sacked by Chelsea. And he'd never lost a league game at Chelsea. In fact, he never lost at Stamford Bridge he'd lost a Champions League game, but he'd never lost a league game. And he winked at me after the game and said, "I never lose at Stamford Bridge." And he went into the press conference and he spoke about Roman Abramovich, who of course had sacked him. And he said, "Mr. A is a very clever man. He is a very, very clever man. But I think he made the mistake of thinking that football is simpler than it is," which was, of course, a knife into the back of Roman. Is it? You're a coach. You've been a coach for over 20 years. Is it a harder game than people imagine? And is the hardest thing of all to make it simple?
I think we're coming at it from very different angles, Neil, because I look at the leagues where only 1 or 2 clubs ever win as if I don't want to be in that country watching football, with the greatest respect. The democracy of English football has always been wonderful. It's been challenged a lot because the rich have a system in place where they stay rich and it's harder for the other clubs to challenge. But we are talking about Crystal Palace being 4th, but we have seen Bournemouth up in the table and they've come back down again. Brentford at times, and Brighton, who could have gone 5th, but they only drew with West Ham. I like the spread, if you like, because that's what it always used to be like. And because you support a club and have supported a club through the different eras, you do understand the differences I'm making. But I don't see it as, I mean, I'm a bit smart on PSG because I'm doing the Champions League game in a couple of days' time. So I've been doing my normal research for a commentary on it. And they don't look in bad shape at all. I think they've scored 50-odd goals in 21 games. And as I say, they've had some big, a 7-2 away win in the Champions League. They beat Spurs 5-3, didn't they? So I don't think there's too much going wrong there. And the Real Madrid, Barcelona. Well, I think Jose Mourinho will be the first to tell you win games by scoring 1 more goal than the opposition. And if it happens to be that kind of, Manchester City got a 5-4 scare at Fulham, but they still went home with the points. And you could say, well, they're at the back. They're by far the top scorers in the Premier League, aren't they? But they're not so clever at the back. I mean, you can't have it always. That's really what I'm saying. And clubs should be made to challenge it. To answer, in non-league football, always was the next game to win, just the same it is in the Premier League. And in the National League, we felt exactly that. So the challenge was always hard, because to win a game, it's a massive effort, collective effort from all those behind the scenes. Obviously, more behind the scenes the higher up we go than in the non-league game. But there are plenty of people pulling the scouts, people doing data analysis, even in part-time football. And so to win a game with all that data against a team that's doing exactly the same, there are no easy hits. I think where it's become harder is that the teams don't throw in the towel. They fight the first whistle to last in every game they play, even if they're bottom of the table. And yeah, it should be hard. It should be hard.
I think where it's become harder is that 20 years ago, or certainly pre-Sky, 1992, you weren't able to get, as a football club, a recording of every game. And the managers and their assistants used to be running around finding contacts who may have a recording of a game in order to watch the opposition. And I remember that going on so much, and particularly in European games. Now every game is at that level is filmed, and it's far.
You used to have the scouts, not the official scouts. There were a lot of good football people driving black taxis in London, and they would park up outside a training ground on instructions from a club that they were supporting or had a little bit of a financial involvement in, getting some money for doing this, and look over the fence to see what the system was in training. And there were people deployed at all the training grounds to make sure they swept these guys away. So yeah, of course it's more available now, and from the commentary point of view, that's very good because far more available for us. I've looked over a few fences at training grounds in my time as well, but I have been invited in more often than not, I must say. So no, it's a marvelous game. We're not called the joy of football for nothing, and the joy comes with the special nature of how hard it is to achieve success and find those moments that bind us forever to what we love.
And I just want to round this off by we've spoken about Mourinho. He's now in charge of Benfica. The Lisbon derby was last Friday. Benfica won, Sporting Club won. Over 65,000 there on a Friday night to watch it. How fantastic is that? Who needs a Super League? Absolutely brilliant. Okay. We are going to talk about a lot of other things, including Overland and Sea and three of the best. But here on The Joy of Football, sponsored today by St James's Place, we're going to have Martin Tyler's Letter from the Gantry.
Letter from the Gantry.
Thanks, Neil. With you in Italy, it brought back my memories of working in that true football country with a rare passion for the game. The World Cup, Italia 90, was a pinnacle. There were 52 games, and I commentated on 39 of them, mostly off a monitor in a sound booth in the International Broadcast Centre on the outskirts of Rome, but around a dozen in the stadia, including both semi-finals and the final. It was the start of a long and very happy relationship with SBS Australia, but the beginning was not auspicious. There was a miscommunication re-accommodation, and the whole crew, most of whom had made the much longer flight from down under compared to my short hop from London, had nowhere to stay. While the chaos was being sorted out, some of the technical operators who just arrived went for a look around and found a five-a-side football pitch, typical of the sports-hungry Aussies. Unfortunately, in the subsequent kickabout, one of the cameramen was knocked into the wire netting fencing, suffered a severe cut, and was out of the tournament before he'd even laid his head on a pillow in Italy. For the rest of us, Italia 90 was a wonderful experience. England had a good tournament, losing only on penalties in the semi-finals to Germany. Whatever happened, the FA had already decided that it would be the end of Bobby Robson's 8-year stint as England's manager. Bobby was a fantastic help to we commentators, very accessible, helpful, and honest. It was that honesty I encountered earlier in that tournament. England had drawn their first two group games against the Republic of Ireland and the Netherlands, so if match 3 went wrong against Egypt, England would be out and Bobby would be finished. Out of gratitude for all he'd done to help me, letting me into training sessions and marking my card, over team selections, I wanted to wish him luck for the match and also thank him for making my job so much easier. I didn't say it, but just in case, it would be his final game. At the England training camp, he took my call and we chatted for a good 10 minutes. But right at the end, he admitted, Martin, I only picked up the phone when they told me a Tyler was wanting to speak to me. I thought they meant Taylor, Graham Taylor. Graham had already been named as Bobby's successor. Talk about the wind being taken out of one's sails. Italia 90 also included a chance meeting with Jeff Shreves for the first time at a photocopying machine. Jeff was an estate agent back then, but was in Rome helping out his friend Mick Luckhurst, an Englishman who'd become a successful NFL kicker with the Atlanta Falcons. And because of his nationality and fame in the USA, he'd been corralled, into covering the tournament for the American TV rights holders. I said I would meet up with Jeff back in England because he saw a career opportunity in television. We ended up working together at Sky Sports for over 30 years, and now he's in the USA with a major on-screen role in the football coverage for CBS. As Sir Alex so often said at the end of Jeff's interviews with him, well done, Jeff. Paul Gascoigne and David Platt, stars of England's tournament, earned transfers to Serie A. Des Walker too. It was very much seen as an upward move pre-Premier League. As part of the Gaza deal, Lazio and Spurs played challenge games against each other, home and away, though they were delayed because of Paul's serious knee injury in the 1991 FA Cup final. I was sent to Rome in September 1992 to commentate on the first leg. Lazio won 3-0, and Gaza scored the opening goal after 10 minutes and stole the show in the Olympic Stadium, the scene of that Italia 90 World Cup final, which he would have missed through suspension had England got through. David Platt went to Bari and then had a season with Juventus and 2 with Sampdoria. It was the time when only 3 foreigners could be on the team sheet for each Serie A club, so you had to be very good to get the gig. I was there as a reporter when Barry unveiled David. He too was extremely helpful, and in return we gave him behind-the-scenes camera footage, which I hope he looks at and looks back on with fondness even today. I'd covered the 1980 European Championships for ITV, also in Italy. Pronunciation lessons for co-commentator Ron Atkinson, but only by the pool and at 5 when the sun was going down. We did a Greece game together. He still says, Adi Zoglu, one of their star players, as a greeting when our paths crossed today. And the Greece manager, Alkaitas Panagoulias, who later managed the USA, was a real gent in redoing a long interview a day after the original had succumbed to a technical issue. England went out at the group stage then. 2 years later, Ron Greenwood gave way to Bobby Robson, which is where we came in.
Italy. So much to talk about. But before we do, I just want to bring you, everyone, a message from our sponsor. Now that the Chancellor's budget is done, you might be wondering what it means for you, for your family, and your future. You won't be alone. There's lots to understand about how what she announced could impact your finances. If you're feeling like you need some help, know that St. James's Place has a national community of advisors that offer one-to-one financial advice. And a St. James's Place financial advisor can help with your plan for the future, empowering you to make confident choices around your family finances. Visit sjp.co.uk to find your one-to-one financial advisor. And St. James's Place representatives represent only St. James's Place Wealth Management PLC, which is authorised and regulated by the Financial Conduct Authority. SJP approved 21st of October 2025. There you go, everyone. St. James's Place sponsoring today. Martin, let's go straight on from your letter today to a themed subject over land and sea and talk about Italy, because where you came in with what you were talking about in the letter, obviously, Italy was the best league in the world for so long. And it all collapsed in 2006 with I'm not quite sure how they pronounce it. It's Calciopoli, isn't it? Calciopoli, I think. And what happened was Juventus were found guilty of paying to get certain referees to referee their games or not referee their games. So it was an administrative thing. It wasn't actually paying the referees. And Milan, Lazio and Fiorentina were also found guilty of it. And the person looking into it, the head of looking into it, wanted to relegate all 4 clubs, which would have destroyed this best league in the world. But in fact, in the end, only Juventus were relegated, and Milan, Lazio and Fiorentina all got fines and points deductions the following season. But as a result of that happening in 2006, over 30 of the best foreign players left Italy. In Serie A, left Italy. And Serie A has never been the same again. And the misfortune as well for them was that 3 years later, before the league had had a chance to recover, financial fair play came in. So they were suddenly forced under by financial fair play at a time when they needed investment and now couldn't do it because they had fallen by the wayside. And if you look back at 2005, which was a season before all this started, if you look back at 2005, when they played the famous final against Liverpool in the Champions League, 3-0 up, 3-3, and Liverpool won on penalties. But the overseas players in that Milan team were Dida, the Brazilian goalkeeper, Cafu, the best right-back in the world, Brazilian, Jaap Stam, Dutch, arguably the best centre-back in the world, Clarence Seedorf, who won the Champions League with 3 different clubs, so he was a bit of a good player, Dutch, of course, Kaká, the Brazilian number 10, and the 2 forwards, they played a 4-2 against Liverpool in the final. The 2 forwards were the Ukraine megastar, Andrei Shevchenko, and the most expensive footballer in the world, the Argentine Hernan Crespo.
Well, they changed the laws, the regulations for 3 foreigners then, hadn't they? A long time before, actually. And I guess the whole structure of Italian football, I'm not a financial expert, but it went down and down and down, really. And I don't know whether the traditions were held on to for too long, whether, when you think the Premier League started in 1992, a lot of upward movement happened because of change of structure, and they never quite had that to try and, I don't know, it's just like, let's put an end to what the past is. Let's really try now to get it to be something different. And the Premier League has shown, and it wasn't instant, of course, but obviously now 30 years plus on, that's the right way to do it. And that reboot of Italian football, I guess, maybe still hasn't happened. But it's not too late for it to happen. I'm sure there's enough sponsorship, although there's questions about ownership in Serie A clubs, as there is, of course, in England as well. It's not seen as such an investment, so it does need something pulling it together, really, to reignite the profile. It was a real privilege. I did quite a lot of Serie A commentaries in my career, late 80s, early 90s, and it was really special. There was a time where I was actually flown out to Rome on a Sunday, and to do wherever the game was, I had to go to the television centre in Rome, and I flew out in the morning. The game often kicked off at around 2:00 English time, so it was a bit of a rush to get there, and then came back home afterwards. So it was a day out in Italy in which I sat in a television studio. But I did it because it was special football, special talent, and an engrossing game week in, week out. But I must say I haven't watched so much since. And maybe that says something more about my lifestyle, that I haven't lost my love for what Italians have brought to the game. But look, the national team also represents that, despite having won the Euros at Wembley against England, qualifying for World Cups, and they're in the playoffs now, aren't they? So they're not even sure of a place in a 48-team World Cup. And that's mystifying. You're going to laugh at this because I do go to the hairdressers, and you said to me the last time, which hair are they cutting? And he's an Italian, and so we talk, and he laments this, that, and the other, and it's very rarely a positive conversation. But it's a great country. I know you're a connoisseur of food, much more than me, but I love Italian food, and I love the people, and I love the football, and it resonates in that, top of the range history of the game. They've done so much, the Italians, for the good of football.
Yeah, but they haven't won the Champions League since 2010. They missed the World Cup in 2018 and 2022. It would be unthinkable that they miss another one. And everyone talks football. Everyone. I mean, Bergamo is a smallish city, about an hour away by road from Milan. And Atalanta is not a big club, but it's punched above its weight for so long. It won its first ever trophy, of course, the Europa League recently. Lost its manager in the summer after he'd been here for years to Roma. Gasperini, I've forgotten his name.
Gasperini,
yeah. Bizarrely brought in Juric, who took Southampton down last season, got rid of him after 15 games, and now are going again. But it's. I do think it's the most methodical football in Europe, in Serie A. I do think it's often football by numbers and coach dominant in a way that not even the Premier League has become.
Well, maybe it was, Neil. Maybe it was because of the Catenaccio coaches when Italy had a lot of success taking the crown from Spain, really, in the 60s, and a lot of European successes. And that was, and playing against an Italian team for an English club then was, gosh, if you went a goal down as an English club, you weren't going to get anything from the game because the defending was so rigid. And they've perhaps taken that into every aspect of football now. You and I both think the game is overcoached, so perhaps we shouldn't watch as much Italian football as we do.
Well, I mean, and when you look at several years ago, probably a decade ago, the wonderful Gianfranco Zola came on the radio show I had in America and said that there was a real problem with youth coaching in Italy because they were over-coaching and they were only concerned about winning and they weren't developing players. And this was at all levels of youth coaching. And he really lambasted it. And he's the nicest geezer in the world, as you know. And said that it just wasn't working. And the big, so they were all recruiting big kids and fast kids and not talented kids. And I saw a quote this week from an agent whose name escapes me. Used to be a winger at Millwall. Agent, left winger.
Barry Silkman.
Barry Silkman, well done. The very Barry Silkman, who said that all coaches do now is pass, pass, pass. None of them say, who's got a trick? Who's got something that will win you a game? And I think that's what happened in Italy. And really, I think Mario Balotelli is the only Italian in the last 20 years who's emerged and played like the great Italians, the Roberto Baggios, the Gianfranco Zolas, and the great Italians going back. They don't seem to produce them at the moment.
Well, the Italian record of the national team suggests that. I don't know enough about the youth coaching system to pass judgment on it, but individual talent is genuinely a bit frowned on in a team game by coaches today because it's unpredictable. And of course, that's what the fans want to see, and unpredictable players. And that's what we as broadcasters and commentators want to see, because that lights up our lives. I love the goals where there's lots and lots of passes. I love the technical goals. The goal that Fulham, Harry Wilson scored, even in defeat against Crystal Palace, was just a delightful thing. And
the goal the goal that Harry Wilson scored against Tottenham. I mean, it got publicity because the Tottenham supporters booed Vicario, and then Thomas Frank booed the Tottenham supporters, if you like. But Harry Wilson, what a goal that was!
Yeah, no, he's got. He may not be a great goal scorer, but he's a scorer of great goals, that's for sure. And in fact, I think Marco Silva's been on at him a bit about missing easy chances. I think that came out of the post-match press conference, and scoring great goals. But no, I mean, there's a range of football skills. What you prioritise is, in most cases, is what you've got. In the top clubs, of course, it's what you can get, and so you have a choice. So if you want strong players, I mean, Leeds, we talked about today, they definitely went for tall players in the summer. You know, they brought everybody in who they possibly could get, midfield players as well as defenders and strikers. And so that was a policy thing. They went for that. So I do think there's a lot of variety, and maybe the street football that produced these individual talents doesn't exist anymore because of all sorts of reasons. But that's where many of the former greats learned their play, their style of play, and there were no coaches there to tell them to do anything otherwise. They just felt it and played to their strengths. So no, it's an interesting debate.
That is over land and sea and Italian football. I just think these financial structures that are brought in take a snapshot of how things are now, and you get a little bit stuck with how things are now, and that's what's happened to Aston Villa and what happened maybe to Nottingham Forest as well. You get stuck with what you are when the financial regulations come in, and it can be a hindrance. Needs to be thought about. Okay, we're going to finish with 3 of the best.
And he makes them pay.
3 of the best. He's made them pay, and that completes a wonderful hat-trick.
3 of the best. Martin, young player.
Yeah, Kelly and Mai of Salford City is not a name perhaps that many of you would have heard of. He's in his early 20s, I think he's 21. Born in the Netherlands, but he came to the UK. His family moved to the UK when he was relatively young because he came through the Salford youth system, and they cry, "He's one of our own, he's one of our own. Kelly and Mai, he's one of our own." And he scored 2 against Leighton Orient. I covered the game on Friday night, FA Cup second round football. He scored 2 goals. He got them into the second round because they were 1-0 down to another League One side, and Salford in League Two, of course, Lincoln City in the first round, and he equalised in the 90th minute. And it went to a penalty shootout, which Salford got through. So they faced the O's, who weren't very good on the night, I have to say. But Kelly he wasn't the only one. The first goal was an own goal, a crazy own goal. The first goal of the second round, it was a Friday night, it was the first fixture. And there was a cross definitely going away from the goal, from quite close to the front post. And it touched the defender and then went through the legs of a slightly disconcerted goalkeeper, hit him on the heel and went to the net for an own goal. But they needed the second goal, and Kelly claimed it, and it was his goal because another player, Callum Cisse, he had a shot, a really great shot from an angle, and he turned away. It hit the net, and it flown in. But what he didn't realise that Kelly and Mai stuck out his knee, and it just went off he kneed it into the net. They needed the goal. And there was a lovely shot in the coverage of Cisse celebrating, and then Kelly and Mai running across and saying, no, it's my goal. And then Cisse's going, no, it's my goal, with smiles, I have to say. But it was definitely Mai's goal. And then when they were cruising at the end, he ran from it. There was a ball over the top, and he was onside from his own half, and he ran through. And I said in my commentary, he'll score because he's just got that confident finishing ability. So he's my young player. I do want to give a mention to Thierno Barry, who at the end of last week we felt so sorry for him for having a seemingly good goal ruled out. He'd been waiting for such a long time. to get on the score sheet for Everton, his first season at the club. And he's done it now against Nottingham Forest, and there was no doubt about that one. So a big weight off his mind. He's a young talent with plenty to offer, and I hope it kicks him on to scoring more regularly now.
Yeah, he's put a big weight on my mind, though, because Liam Delap still hasn't scored this season. Has now dislocated his shoulder, and so he's obviously not going to score in 20.
He has scored, but not in the Premier League.
Yeah, in the Club World Cup.
To be fair to him, it was only against Barcelona, wasn't it?
Oh yeah, no, he scored in the Champions League.
Yeah. So I'm sticking up for the strikers as always.
My young player he's just turned 24 last month, so I can have him. I say, Adrien Truffert, the Bournemouth left back. He was bought in the summer from Rennes, that famous club of production line young French players, to replace Milos Kerkez. Now, you and I in particular raved about Kerkez as the Bournemouth left back, and he's gone to Liverpool and he has struggled. You're saying that he's settled a little bit more.
No, I think the word out of Anfield is that he's settling and he's doing better. But yeah, it's that classic case of being a big fish in a small pond and suddenly finding that you've got to fight to swim in the bigger pond.
Well, Adrien Truffert has walked into Bournemouth, and everyone at Bournemouth, as far as I can make out, they're all raving about him. And certainly, my first view of him at the weekend, he looks a very good player indeed, both defensively and offensively. He's hit the ground running for Bournemouth, and they've done it again. He was actually born in Belgium, but to French parents, and moved back to France when he was young. Rennes is a great breeding ground for players, and he looks as though he's going to keep Bournemouth safe and Premier League moving on for some time to come. Just watch him. He's a joy. Your old player.
Well, this is stretching a point, really, because I have no idea whether he played. It's Darren England, the referee, who is 39, so he's of the age. But the best game I've seen, we had a section a couple of podcasts ago about best game been at this season, and I was struggling really to find something that was exceptional, but I have one now. I'm sure it'll be trumped as the season goes on, but with great respect to you, Neil, Leeds against Chelsea was a tremendous game to broadcast and full of atmosphere and different kinds of moments, bizarre and brilliant. And Darren England.
Can I just interrupt you and say that the most genial, the nicest man in the world you might be, but Leeds 3, Chelsea 1 is your best game of the season. Sometimes you can be an utter bastard.
I did warn you. Anyway, Darren England refereed it, and I believe, and I was able to pop in and see him afterwards because I wanted to, that it was the game that we saw, whatever you think of it, it was the game we saw because of the way it was refereed. It was a game that had enough physicality in it to be stop, and occasionally starting, but a lot of stoppages. And he had a high bar in that respect about stopping it. And there was a wonderful episode right in front of the dugouts where there were 3 front-on challenges, one after another for the ball, all fair, all absolutely fair. He was about 10 yards away from it. He saw it perfectly, and the game was played on until there was a genuine foul, and he stopped it. And he's had one or two tough moments, as all the referees have in the Premier League panel. He was involved, of course, just 4 days earlier with the Lucas Paquetá, who virtually demanded to be sent off in the West Ham versus Liverpool game. But he was straight back on the job on the following Wednesday, and I want to say, well done. I do understand. I'm very fortunate to mix a bit with the referees. That's the way it is at grounds where you do get to talk to them if you're a broadcaster, particularly a television broadcaster. And I thought he did a fantastic job. And I'm sure there'll be another game, maybe even one that Chelsea win, that will surpass it as the game of the season so far. But if you want to call me that, 7-letter word beginning with B. I'll take it, Neil.
What I will say is that if you watch a game in the crowd, then the people around you bring all their prejudices to it, and any challenge is a foul against your player, and all the abuse goes to the referee and to the opposition and to the players they don't like when they make perceived errors. And if you're me and you go home and you watch the bits that you didn't quite see clearly again, and you made a note of it, you find out that actually the referee made a lot of correct decisions, and you know what I think of referees, and that actually that shot was going in and got blocked or got saved, and a lot of things are slightly different from how they're perceived. So I'm going to agree with you on that something can be well.
You've got your glasses on, and as a journalist and broadcaster, you're very, very two-eyed. But as a Chelsea fan, you're extraordinarily one-eyed. But I did walk into that by suggesting we did a podcast together.
And my old player is a Chelsea player, a one-eyed, someone who was acknowledged at that Leeds game with both teams wearing black armbands. Marvin Hinton had died aged 85 that week. I adored Marvin Hinton and obviously knew him well down the years, and his family. And he was a very good central defender. Chelsea bought him from Charlton in the 1960s, played in the 1967 Cup final, won the FA Cup and the European Cup Winners' Cup medals as substitute. He wasn't tall, and he was the kind of player who would have cost an absolute fortune today, because he read the game, he could play the game, and he would have been able to play out from the back as a central defender. But the reason I really want to talk about him, I mean, he was a fabulous bloke, but he was a fabulous bloke because he was a genuine bloke. But the reason I want to talk about him is because he was from the first era of players when the £20 a week wage limit went, but you didn't make enough to live on for the rest of your life as they do now. Players do now. So when in the 70s he retired from football, he finished up being a porter at Gatwick Airport for quite a long period. And then after that, he bought a van and he started a removal business. And he got on with his life quietly, didn't want any glory from his previous years, but he loved his football. So he didn't ask for it free, he bought a season ticket at Chelsea, where he spent the majority of his football career, and he went with his family and he supported his team, and he did that into his 80s, paying for his ticket. And it's just fabulous that his career was football, his love was football, and his family had it as well. When he retired, I'll just tell a little story. When he retired in it would have been late 2006, he retired.
I mean, retired, like not from football, he retired from work.
Yeah. And I think he had a little place abroad by now, and he and his wife went there for a couple of weeks. And while they were away, his son phoned me and said they're coming back in 2 weeks, and Chelsea are at Barcelona 2 days later. Is there any way that you could organise some tickets? And I went to the club and asked them. I got them 4 tickets. So that was Marvin, wife, son, wife. And they went out after he came back. He didn't know when he came back from this holiday, his retirement holiday, 2 weeks, that he was going to go abroad again 2 days later and go and spend a couple of days in Barcelona and watch Barcelona-Chelsea. But it was a fabulous, fabulous moment for him. And I went and had lunch with them while they were over there. And he was just so grateful. He was just so grateful. But he continued to be a paying season ticket holder to the end, didn't ask for anything. Marvin Hinton.
Leeds didn't have to wear black armbands. That happens sometimes. It's one club honouring a loss in their football family. But they recognised that Marvin was substitute in both the 1970 FA Cup final against Leeds and the replay, and got on at Wembley for the first game and at Old Trafford for the second game. And they recognised that they should be part of saying farewell by doing it. It was a nice touch, I thought, by the home team.
Brilliant. Your player?
Yeah, my player is a Leeds player. You did flag this up earlier. Dominic Calvert-Lewin, again going for the striking option, if you like, who it's been very hard to fathom out his career after his tour to England. I think he scored 4 England goals and looked like he was, going to be like the regular deputy for Harry Kane. But injuries have just quite literally slowed him down and slowed his career down as well. And at Everton, it just sort of came to an end, really. And I think they might have offered him a new deal, but he chose to move on. He's moved to Leeds. And the goals have been hard to come by for him in the closing stage of his Everton career. But this change of system has actually really given him a support striker, which is, is a wonderful thing. It's only if you play 3-5-2 can you get away with it in the top level to get 2 real strikers in. 4-4-2, you normally have 4-4-1-1. One of the supposed front men has got a mark there. Deepest midfield player or something like that. So I'm sure he's benefited from it. In the second half, when they switched the system at Manchester City, he won a penalty and scored a goal. And then he hadn't scored at Ellen Road for his new club. He got the gift of the goal that Chelsea wrapped up an early Christmas present to wrap up the game. And then he scored, of course, the penalty against Liverpool. And so I think it's a lot. It may be 5 years. I haven't checked this out, but maybe 5 years since he scored in 3 Premier League games in a row. So what a lift that is. And he's played most of the minutes as well, which is another thing that he wasn't doing when his fitness was letting him down, and because of that, his form was letting him down. So he's got it in him to come again. He's got all the attributes, really. Good in the air, strong, decent turn of pace, but he just needs to stay fit. And if he can do, he might now, if we don't know whether Daniel Farke is going to stick with his system, but if he does, he'll get the best out of Dominic Calvert-Lewin.
Yeah, it was the best I've ever seen him play, and he was rightly man of the match. And excellent. And if he does keep playing, maybe some of that pace will come back. It does.
Yeah.
My player is also from that game. And to my shame, I'd never heard of him. And even more to my shame, because I'd seen him play. But Gabriel Gudmundsson, the Swedish left back who played left wing back, I come back to where some of our discussion today started. What he gave the team was energy, was thundering running, was intensity, up and down the flank, bang, 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 trying to get behind the opposition defence, cross the ball. It wasn't technically a brilliant game by him, but it was physically fantastic. And there's nothing wrong with that. And intensity and determination, just commitment counts for so much, even at the highest level, and should never be overlooked. He played for Lille in 2022 in the round of 16 in the Champions League against Chelsea. He came on in Lille at left back in the second half, and at Stamford Bridge he played an hour and 10, an hour and 15 minutes on the left wing. So he can attack and he can defend. I only know that because I've looked it up in my records. So I don't remember him, as I say. But I remember him. I keep my team to make you scream the best 90-minute performances against Chelsea individually. He's in at left back, even though it was left wing back. He's in at left back.
He saw off Esteval, didn't he? And Esteval could have been sent off, actually.
Well, I thought I said to you a moment ago about when you watch things back, they're not quite how you see them in the stadium. I was appalled when I watched that back that I hadn't seen it clearly. And I actually had an argument with somebody, a Chelsea supporter, who watched it on television, wasn't at the game. And I said that was a 100% red card for me. Yeah.
And he went off, and of course Pedro Neto came on and scored within 2 minutes. So Gabriel didn't quite have the perfect game. I guess it was his man, but he snuck in at the far post, didn't he?
Yeah.
Talked a lot about intensity today, haven't we? Players, coaches as well, fans, and even broadcasters. It's energy and intensity is a really important part of what we all do, and why we all love the drive and the passion of football. It's not something to sit and be over considerate about. You want to really give yourself to the subject, really, and the players have to do the same. As much as they are coached, they then are now put onto their own personality to perform, and those kind of performances, they do catch the eye. It's just a surprise that Sweden hasn't done so well, isn't it? I mean, it's obviously played a lot for them.
And if you talk to a football coach, they will say that commitment is the ultimate difference between a player making it and not making it, because at that level, skill is a given. Skill gets you there, and then either the commitment lets you down, or it means that you carry on at that level. And commitment is absolutely critical to all coaches. Absolutely.
So tell us what you're going to have for dinner tonight. Pre-match meal.
Well, I came out yesterday, so I can tell you what I had yesterday, which may help you. We couldn't. It's packed. Everywhere is booked. Today is a religious holiday, and the streets are absolutely packed. There's Christmas markets. The streets are packed, and people seem to have the religion of shopping more than the religion of Catholicism over here right now. And last night I couldn't get into the restaurant we wanted to get into, so we just went into a restaurant down the road, and I started with a wonderful salami together with polenta mixed with a local cheese. That was my starter. Glass of local red wine. Then I had just a Napoli pizza with a mixed salad and another glass of red wine. And for my dessert, I had a grappa. And then they brought me the different liqueur, so I was well on my way then. And then we went to a bar, and I was with an American from LA, who you've met, a Chelsea supporter. And we went into this bar. I ordered another grappa, and before I knew it, we were jumped upon by an American from Houston who supports Chelsea, who I know well as well, who was over here. So I was surrounded by Yanks, and I had 2 more grappas in there, and then I walked home, half an hour walk back to my hotel from there. So
in a straight line?
No, in a steep decline, because the old town's up the top of a hill, and I came charging down to the bottom to the new town where my hotel is. So yeah, but it helped me sober up, and I had a good night's sleep. So yeah. And I've just had while we've been on, I've just had a message that someone's booked a restaurant for tonight. So I'm about to look at the menu and decide whether or not it's a yes or a no from me.
Well, we'd better let you go, that's for sure. Good luck with the game. The religion you've brought to Bergamo, of course, is Chelsea. So.
It is, and eating. And the Italians are wonderful at that. From Martin and me.
See you next time.
Ta-ra, and don't forget, today's episode sponsored by St. James's Place. Cheers, boys. Girls.